Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. Today, I'm going to be having a conversation with Jeffrey Lang. He's a senior litigation counsel for Brandeis Center for Human Rights Under Law. It's an organization that's doing some of the most important work today in confronting anti-Semitism, especially in our universities and schools. The conversation is personal, as my brother just wrote an article about a disturbing incident that took place in Northern Virginia. And I've been grappling with the issue in the way that I know best, through art. I created a painting about anti Semitism in schools. Sadly, it's an issue that's become a lot more prevalent and a lot more accepted than most are willing to admit. At the center of this case is a Jewish family who say that all three of their children were expelled from the Naismith Private School for the Gifted in Northern Virginia, shortly after the parents raised concerns that anti-Semitic bullying was being directed at their 11-year-old daughter. The parents reached out to the founder of the school for a meeting. After that meeting, they received a letter in the mail letting them know that all three of their children were no longer welcome at the school. It's devastating, and sadly, it's not an isolated incident. The Brandeis Center is now representing this family, and I'm truly honored to be speaking with Jeffrey Lang today, not just about the legal details, but also to talk about the deeper cultural patterns it reveals. Jeffrey Lang, thank you so much for being with me here today. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. I appreciate you having me on.
Thank you. I just want to begin by asking you if you can tell me in your own words what actually happened with the family and the school.
Sure. Well, the family, there were three children. They had been enrolled at the Naismith School for 4 years, and they were happy. They, enjoyed the school. The parents were happy. They were pleased. One was a stay-at-home. One of the parents was a stay-at-home dad. He was very active in the school community, volunteered for every activity, chaperone field trips, and just overall, you know, engaged to the extent that the head of school wrote a letter about Brian, saying that he was, a honored member of the community and that they were proud to have the family associated with the school. Um, in February of this earlier of this year, after a play date, I'm sorry, um, they had three children, two 11-year-old twin girls who were in the sixth grade, and an 8-year-old boy who was in the second grade. After a play date, one of the daughter's classmates called Brian, and said he and his mother were on speakerphone, and the little boy told Brian that their daughter had been subjected to bullying because she was Jewish, and it was so bad that it had distressed her classmate, her friend. And he talked to her about it, and she didn't want to tell anyone. She was embarrassed and ashamed. And this little boy felt compelled to ask his mother to call Brian so he could report it. Um, Brian and Ashok were shocked. They arranged a meeting with the head of school for, the next school day. They met with the head of school, Mr. Naismith, and they explained what was happening. And he said that the school would take care of it. They would speak to the bullying children. They would, if that didn't work, they'd speak to the parents, and if that didn't work, those children would be expelled.
Mhm.
Um, so Brian and Ashok were comforted by that. And then over the course of the next few weeks, their daughter was out with the flu, but they were checking on things, and they discovered that she was not only continuing to be bullied, but that it had gotten much worse. The school had hung up a Palestinian flag in the gymnasium. And while Brad and Ashok didn't object to the hanging of the Palestinian flag, they learned that that had become sort of a lightning rod for a whole new round of more intense bullying, where children were pointing at the flag and then pointing at their daughter and saying, "See, everybody hates you. Everybody hates you because you're Jewish. We're glad that October 7th happened. We hope more Jews get killed, and it was just really awful, hurtful things. So they promptly arranged another meeting with the head of school and explained to him what had happened, that their daughter was continuing to be bullied and had gotten much worse. And Mr. Naismith's advice was to tell them that their daughter needed to toughen up. And they were, stunned to say the least,
Sure.
and tried to explain to him how they made clear that they didn't object to the hanging of the Palestinian flag, but the failure to address the anti-Semitism, the bullying, just caused a much more intense round. And they asked if he could see how that would happen, and he said no. And then he ended the meeting.
And at that point, did the parents ask the founder of the school if he had done anything at that point, since it was the second meeting? Did the
Mm.
parents ask if anything had been addressed from their first meeting?
Yeah, he said that somebody had talked to the children, to the bullying children. He didn't say who spoke to them or what was said. Clearly it didn't work,
Sure,
if
sure.
indeed that even happened. Um, they just asked him, "Can you please stop it, step in and protect our daughter?"
Yeah.
Uh, and he said, his advice was, "Your daughter needs to toughen up." That was on a Tuesday morning. And Thursday morning, they received an email notifying them that that would be the last day for all three of their children at the Naismith School. This was, in March. They were told to pick up their children at school. They picked them up at lunchtime and never went back.
Can you go into a little more detail about the bullying itself? So besides after the flag was hanging and the remarks that were made, what else were some examples of the bullying that happened?
There were a few children began putting Palestinian stickers on the school lockers and school laptops. It started with that. We're not sure exactly how far back it started, because Brian and Ashok only learned about it through a classmate, and their daughter was just embarrassed to talk about it. She ultimately confirmed everything. So it started with that, and it moved to taunting, that Jews are baby killers, that you're a Jew, you're a baby killer, your family are baby killers, that they were glad that people were killed in Israel on October 7th. And then, in a sort of a bizarre twist, they said that they were glad that this little girl's uncle had been killed on October 7th. In fact, he had died, but not in Israel or on October 7th. Um, and they just continued to not just call her names, but then they began to mobilize sort of a campaign of ostracizing her, where they began lobbying the other children and pointing at her and saying, "Nobody likes you because you're Jewish."
And were the other kids, the other siblings getting harassed as well? Or
No, it was confined to the one daughter. The other daughter was in a different class altogether and not around some of these children. And the younger boy was in second grade class, and there wasn't the same sort of issue.
okay, and then can you describe to me, because I did read also about this composite drawing that was done. Can you describe the details around that?
Sure. Well, that was that actually happened before Brian and Ashok became aware of the bullying. It was in October of 2024. Um, the school sends out each week a link to a Google Drive of photos so the parents can see what their children did that week. They looked on the drive to see what their children did, and they saw a photo of the daughter who had been bullied, her in class holding up a huge drawing that featured the face of Adolf Hitler. And when they investigated, they learned that the students had been learning about strong historical leaders, and they were told to divide into groups and create a composite drawing of a single strong historical leader, drawing on attributes from those strong historical leaders they learned about. And they depicted the arm of Napoleon. It was a single body, and the face was Adolf Hitler, and a remarkable likeness.
Hmm.
And they were mortified because they saw their daughter. Yeah, they saw a class of sixth graders proudly holding up their drawing of
Yeah.
Adolf Hitler. Um, but they didn't want to jump to any conclusions. They talked to other parents and asked other parents what they thought, and they all concluded that this was inappropriate and a horrible image. But Brian and Ashok decided to chalk it up to just an instance of really poor judgment. And they didn't complain to the school. They were disturbed by it, but they decided not to complain and not to make waves and assumed it was just a terrible mistake.
When they eventually, the parents did go to speak to the founder of the school, did the drawing ever get brought up, or you're unsure it's not part of the whole legal case, but it's just an aside detail?
Yeah, no, it actually didn't. They were focused on the bullying.
Hmm.
They just wanted the school to protect their daughter
Sure.
from being called a Jew and a baby killer, and from being shunned because
Yeah.
she's Jewish. It was only afterwards when we went back and looked at this that, you know, it just, to me, it showed the insensitivity because it's not only a teacher who saw this drawing taking place, but the photographer took the picture, and then the administration who decided that it would be appropriate to post a picture of all these smiling children holding, a huge drawing of Adolf Hitler.
Yeah, it's so bizarre. It sounds like from what you've described that the school didn't do all that much, at least that you know of, to discipline in any way. Do you have any idea what would have made it escalate to the point where all of a sudden the three children were expelled?
Well, I mean, till that point, the two daughters were straight A students,
Hmm.
top of their class. Their report cards were just glowing and remarkable, no disciplinary issues. And the 8-year-old boy, similarly, glowing reports and, model student.
Hmm.
Um, the only explanation they were given was an email, in which the head of school said that that he felt that the parents had lost trust in him and in the school, and that he believed that they've decided that Naismith was not the right school for their children,
So
which,
the school was telling the parents that the school felt like the parents have decided the school is no longer right for their family.
yeah, and these are parents who had already paid the deposits, a substantial deposit on next year's tuition,
Wow.
had no inclination to remove their children. They just wanted the school to protect their daughter from anti-Semitic bullying. They were shocked.
And at that point, did the parents ever speak to the founder again, or did they just accept his letter and then proceed forward with legal action?
There was nothing to talk about. The letter said, pick up your children. The teachers apparently hadn't even been notified of the expulsion. The kids didn't have a chance to say goodbye to any of their friends or family. Um, their daughter was supposed to receive a medal she had earned in a science fair the very next day, but she wasn't allowed to pick up her medal, and the kids weren't allowed to retrieve their personal belongings. So there was no further discussion. And after that, the parents focused solely on helping their children through this, horrible, horrible time, and scrambling to enroll them in online education courses. It's the middle of March,
Yeah.
and trying to find a new school for them for this coming year.
What are the legal claims being made? Is it a civil rights claim, or what exactly is it that's being claimed?
Yeah, it's a civil rights claim under the Virginia Human Rights Act, which prohibits discrimination in any kind of public accommodation. And public accommodation is defined broadly to include educational institutions. And under the act, before we can file a claim in court, we first have to file a complaint with the Virginia Attorney General's Office of Civil Rights. So we've done that.
Mhm.
And now the Office of Civil Rights is conducting an investigation, and they can decide either to pursue an action on behalf of the state if they perceive that there's discrimination that poses a risk to the public, or they can issue us a right to sue letter, and then we'll promptly file a complaint in state court.
To date, have you heard any response from the school, either publicly or privately, concerning the issue?
We haven't heard directly from the school. I've seen statements that Mr. Naismith has made publicly and in newspapers. Oh, I should back up and add a little bit more context,
Okay.
if you don't mind. During this few week period, after after the parents had spoken to the head of school about the bullying the first time, one of the children's teachers asked Brian if he could help, if he was aware of any organizations that could help find a Holocaust survivor to speak to some of the upper class students who were studying World War II. They had a Holocaust survivor who spoke at the school for many years. That speaker had recently passed away, and the teacher was looking for another survivor to share his or her experiences. Brian introduced the teacher to the JCRC of Greater Washington, who had lined up a number of candidates and was ready to schedule a speaker when they were told the Naismith School is no longer looking for a Holocaust speaker. And when Brian inquired, he found out that Mr. Naismith had canceled the Holocaust program altogether
Mhm.
because of his concern that it would inflame emotions in light of the situation in Gaza. And Brian did have a conversation with him and asked and suggested to him that the Holocaust really is not related to events in Gaza, that the Holocaust is a historical event that took place 80 years ago in Europe, and it's unrelated to what's happening now in the Middle East.
Mhm.
And Mr. Naismith rejected that analysis and stood by his decision to cancel it altogether.
And again, this happened in the time period, how much sooner or after the children getting expelled?
Well, they learned that the Holocaust speaker had been canceled 2 days before they discovered the Palestinian flag had been hung,
Okay.
um, and and then spoke a couple days after that to Mr. Naismith. So it all took place in a very short time period. And the one thing that struck us is the idea that you would cancel an opportunity for children to hear from a Holocaust survivor because of events in Gaza,
Mhm.
and at the same time not realize that hanging a Palestinian flag when there's anti-Semitic bullying going on at that time could inflame that situation. But in public statements, Mr. Naismith has rejected any sort of comparison, or rejected any sort of relationship. And in fact, he continues in his public statements to defend his decision to cancel an opportunity for children to hear from a Holocaust survivor because of events in Gaza,
Right.
which to us sort of smacks of anti-Semitism.
I think it's interesting because in the news, we hear so much about anti-Semitism problems in elite universities or universities as well. And we haven't heard that much about kindergarten through 12th grade problems. And so I just wonder, do you think there's something that we're actually missing as a society that we're not seeing, that there is a problem in K through 12 as well that is very similar to what's going on in the college level?
Yeah, absolutely. The parents in this action, Brian and Ashok, are to be credited for their tremendous strength and conviction to come forward. And we at the Brandeis Center know that there are many, many more parents um, who don't come forward, who are worried about the same types of anti-Semitic incidences happening, um, but they fear retaliation and recrimination, and they choose not to come forward. And we don't blame them for that. It takes real strength and conviction to stand up and subject yourself to, all sorts of attacks. So it happens much, much more frequently than than is evident in, in our filings. We hope to change that, even when we explain to people that retaliation is unlawful. They worry that their children may be outcast, and they worry about younger siblings who have yet to reach that school in their progression. I think it's happening more and more, and what worries me is, as you pointed out, this isn't at a college campus where there are arguments of protected political speech.
Right.
These are children just being exposed to anti-Semitism and bullying as a matter of course, and administrators um, who are ratifying those anti-Semitic tropes and thought.
Which brings me to my next question. What should administrators be doing in a school, in your opinion, in order to be upholding things legally and morally in a school, do you believe, concerning this issue?
In some respects, it's very simple. We all know that when a child is being bullied, schools are supposed to step in and stop it for any reason.
Mhm.
When a child is being bullied because of anti-Semitism or any other discriminatory animus, it's all the more urgent for a school to step in and stop that bullying and explain to the children um, what discrimination is and why it's wrong.
Right.
And in this climate, when anti-Semitism has been surging across the country and in schools, um, it's incumbent upon the administration of these schools to just be aware of anti-Semitism and to keep it in check and not sit idly by while the sort of ugliness persists.
Right. And do you think that there's an extra challenge keeping that in line for private schools because they're not as transparent as public schools? So are you seeing that there's even a bigger issue with private schools or not so much?
I don't think I don't think that there's much of a differentiation between private and public schools, to be honest. I think it's happening in both public and private schools. I think that, we're sometimes surprised when we see this sort of ugliness happen at a school like Naismith, which is ranked as an elite private school. And, you know, we would expect that given the resources of a school like that, they'd be much more careful. But we see that, anti-Semitism is sort of creeping in to all different, schools of every stripe, public, private,
Yeah.
uh, and not just schools.
Yeah, and it's interesting because in the article that my brother wrote, it really touches upon what was going on in the academic elite during World War II and the time leading up to it, what even was happening to Albert Einstein. And then we see in our current times what was happening in the most elite of colleges. So now to have a very elite private elementary school, I'm just curious if you have an opinion of why organizations that we revere and think of as the cream of the crop and the most intellectual, why is it happening there? What is it about that?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I
But
think
I know.
no, I think in part it's our failure to recognize the seriousness of anti-Semitism and what it is. Too often, university schools and people in the United States tolerate anti-Semitism that, if directed at any other group, they wouldn't. I can't imagine a leader of a school canceling a program, any other program for any other minority or demographic group based on something unrelated.
Right.
It doesn't happen, but it seems that there's a willingness to tolerate it when it comes to Jewish people.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a lot of misinformation also being spread. There are well-funded and well-coordinated groups who are promoting, you know, political, sort of a hateful political ideology cloaked as academic learning.
Right.
The
Right.
idea that Israel, there's this idea that's gaining so much traction that Israel is a settler colonial paradigm, suggesting that the Jews in Israel were colonizers from Europe. It effectively erases the Jewish people's entire history.
Yeah.
It denies the indigenous connection to the land of Israel.
Yeah.
And it's kind of an interesting twist because remember, throughout history, Jews have been accused of being foreign interlopers, interfering in the countries that they've been exiled to, and told they should go back to Israel where they belong. And now we're being told they should leave Israel, that they're foreign interlopers in Israel, and they should go back to wherever they came from.
It's really insidious and scary.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I wonder if you feel like there's a role for people in society like storytellers and artists and other types of people. Is there a role for them to do something at this moment in time that you think could be helpful in addition to all the great work that you're doing? Is there something that you think people could do to help?
Yeah, absolutely. I think people, storytellers and artists in particular, should not shy away from our history and and tell our history, the history of the Jewish people, and you know, um, exhibit the reasons and sources to be proud of being Jewish. Um, doesn't mean that the state of Israel is immune from criticism.
Mhm.
Not at all. Many of us criticize the state of Israel's policies and their conduct of war. Um, but distinguishing that from the Jewish people's right to self-determination, their connection to the land of Israel, and just their right to dignity as a people. And storytellers and artists are capable of presenting, the most powerful stories.
I want to also ask you, in kind of wrapping up, if you have any advice for parents who might be facing similar situations, what they can look out for to realize that it's happening and what they should do if they see red flags.
First, I think it's very important to talk to your children at all ages and and understand what's happening at the school. There are there's a lot of discourse and ideology that in our schools, and schools are a place to explore ideology, but they should be in touch with their students, with their children, and understand what's happening and be aware of hateful speech that's being tolerated and be aware of their children's anxiety about expressing their Jewish identity. We've seen students who stop wearing Stars of David or kippot for fear of being ridiculed. Um, and parents should look out for those sorts of red flags. And if they see it, I'd encourage them to call or email the Brandeis Center. We have a call helpline. We respond to everyone who calls or emails us. And we don't pressure people to do anything. We just want to be a resource, to be helpful, and to collect information so we can, for our own purposes, track progress.
Sure.
Um, but all of it's done in confidence, without any pressure, and only offers of help and support.
Excellent. Well, I'll make sure that I include that number in the description in the
I
video.
appreciate it.
Yeah, sure. I will. And I really appreciate your time. You've been a wealth of information,
Yeah.
and I'm so glad that you made the time for me.
It's my pleasure, and thank you for all the work that you do, and for, the lessons of your art.
Thank you. I appreciate that so much. Thanks, Jeff.
Okay, thank you.